Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive all about the art of persuasion.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at the art of persuasion, winning without intimidation today.
Exactly, and we want to help you win people over without being pushy.
And that's the real key here, isn't it?
Yeah, we're not talking about manipulation or
Right.
like
Just trying to understand how to connect authentically and build relationships.
build relationships that benefit everyone.
Absolutely.
And one of the biggest takeaways that I got from the book was just the power of simple respect
Hmm.
and gratitude.
Oh, yeah.
The author really drives home this idea that making people feel good about themselves is really the key.
It sounds so simple, right?
Yeah.
But it really is about tapping into basic human psychology.
Yeah, and I've noticed this so many times in my own life,
Oh, I'm sure.
just little things.
Like what?
Well, like, I remember this one time I was interviewing this columnist for a story,
Okay.
and, I called her up, and before I could even introduce myself properly,
Yeah.
she's like, "Thank you for keeping this brief,"
Oh, wow.
right off the bat.
Assuming the worst.
I was like, wow,
Yeah.
talk about assuming the worst.
That would make me want to hang up too.
It really made me want to hang up right there.
Yeah.
Just that assumption that I was going to, keep her on the phone.
Right.
It was
That
amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting how such a small thing can have such a big impact on how an interaction goes.
On the tone of the whole conversation.
Yeah, totally. And it just highlights the importance of,
Mhm.
being mindful of how we make people feel, even in those, brief encounters.
Even those little moments, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But contrast that with,
Okay.
Muriel, who makes sandwiches at my local deli.
Oh, yeah, you've mentioned Muriel before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What is it about her sandwiches that keeps you coming back?
Well, she piles on the pastrami like nobody's business.
All right.
But I also think part of it is, I always make it a point to express my appreciation for her.
Mm.
Like I thank her for making the sandwiches with care.
Okay.
I tell her how much I enjoy them. I compliment her on the way she adds like the extra pickles or, just little
Okay.
things.
Have you noticed a difference between how she treats you
Oh,
and other customers?
absolutely. She always goes above and beyond for me.
Okay. Interesting.
Sometimes she throws in an extra cookie or two.
Oh, wow.
It's almost like she enjoys making my sandwich more
Mm-hmm.
because she knows I appreciate the effort.
I think you've tapped into something really powerful there, which is called positive reinforcement.
Oh, interesting.
So, when we reward a behavior,
Mm-hmm.
even with something as simple as a genuine compliment,
Yeah,
we increase the likelihood that that behavior is going to get repeated.
that makes sense.
Right. And that's true whether we're talking about a deli worker,
Right.
a colleague, a boss, anyone.
It creates this positive, feedback loop
Exactly.
where they feel good because you acknowledge their work
Mm.
and then they're more likely to do good work
Yeah.
because they're getting that positive feedback.
Absolutely.
So it's not about manipulation. It's about just sort of creating that
Right.
positive energy.
Totally.
Speaking of positive energy, the book also talks about the incredible power of turning enemies into friends.
Yeah, that's a big one. And the author actually shares this really profound quote from his father,
Oh, wow.
who said that a mighty person is someone who can control their emotions and make an enemy a friend.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And it really resonated with me.
Why?
Well, I remember this one time I had to deal with this really difficult shipping supervisor.
Okay.
I had to get these boxes out urgently,
Mm-hmm.
and he was being incredibly unhelpful.
Oh, no.
And I was ready for a fight, but then I remembered what I'd read in the book. And instead of mirroring that negative energy, I decided to just,
Take a different approach.
yeah, take a different approach.
Good.
And I took a deep breath and decided to treat him with respect, even though I was super frustrated. I asked him about his work. I acknowledged his position
Okay.
and basically just treated him like a human being.
And
And it was amazing.
what happened?
His whole demeanor changed.
Oh, wow.
He went from being this brick wall to being incredibly helpful.
Wow.
We had a great conversation.
Yeah.
He went above and beyond to make sure my shipment went out on time.
That's a perfect example of how disarming someone
Yeah.
can completely shift the dynamic of an interaction.
Yeah.
Most people, when they're being difficult, they expect defensiveness or hostility in return.
Right.
So when you respond with understanding and respect,
Mm-hmm.
it throws them off guard.
Totally.
And they're much more likely to let their guard down and actually be receptive to what you're asking.
It's like you're flipping the script on him.
Exactly.
It's so powerful.
Totally.
But what about those times when you're dealing with someone who's just plain rude?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say on the phone.
Ah, the dreaded phone call. Those can
Yeah.
be tricky.
Yeah, those can be really challenging.
But the key here, I think, is to remember that the person on the other end of the line is probably just having a bad day.
Right.
They might be stressed, overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and their rudeness is probably not personal.
You're right.
It's just, the situation.
Yeah.
So the book suggests this really interesting tactic called the pre-apology.
What's that?
Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this.
Yeah, so basically you apologize in advance
Mm.
for whatever it is you're about to ask them to do.
Right.
So it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is that you're acknowledging the potential inconvenience or burden that your request might cause them.
Right.
So you're validating their feelings and showing empathy right from the start.
It's almost like you're saying, I know I'm about to ask you to do something that you probably don't want to do.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, and they give this example in the book of someone calling the airline to change their flight, and the ticket agent is just being incredibly rude. So the caller says, look, I'm so sorry to bother you with this. I know you're incredibly busy, but I was hoping you could help me change my flight. And it completely diffused the situation.
Wow.
The agent's entire demeanor changed.
Yeah.
It was like the pre-apology made him realize
Interesting.
that the caller wasn't trying to be difficult. They were just in need of help.
Oh, yeah.
So it shifted the dynamic from like this confrontation to more of a collaboration.
That's so fascinating.
Isn't it?
It really speaks to the power of acknowledging the other person's emotional state.
Right.
Because by recognizing their potential stress or frustration, you're creating a sense of connection and understanding.
It's like you're saying, I see you, I get you, and I'm not here to make your day any harder.
Exactly.
It's really about building that rapport
Totally.
and establishing that foundation of empathy.
Yeah, and that actually leads perfectly into another crucial aspect of persuasion, which is understanding and adapting to different communication styles.
Okay, this is where things get a little more technical.
Yeah.
The book talks about the importance of mirroring and matching the other person's communication style.
Yeah, so basically speaking their language. It's really about being other-focused.
Yeah.
Which is the essence of the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would like to be done unto.
Right. So how do you figure out someone's communication style?
Well, there's a few things you can look out for.
Okay.
Are they visual learners?
Okay.
Do they respond to images and diagrams?
Right.
Or are they auditory learners?
Mm-hmm.
Do they prefer to hear information?
Okay.
Or are they kinesthetic learners?
Mm-hmm.
Do they learn best through hands-on experience?
Yeah, I've never thought about it before, but I'm a very kinesthetic communicator.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm always talking about feeling things.
Okay.
Like feel the momentum building, or I feel like we're making progress. I'm always talking about feelings.
Yeah. That's a great example. And by recognizing your own communication style, you can start to be more aware of how other people might perceive your message.
Okay.
So it's about adapting your language and your approach to resonate with the person you're trying to persuade.
Okay, so if you're talking to someone who's visual, you might want to use more descriptive language. You might even want to draw diagrams.
Absolutely.
Or if they're more auditory, you might focus more on the tone of your voice.
Yeah.
Or use more evocative language. That appeals to their sense of hearing.
It's amazing how these subtle shifts can make a big difference.
It is.
In how your message is received.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
And sometimes the best persuasion tactic is to actually give people an out.
What do you mean?
Especially when you're asking them for a favor or making a request.
Okay, this reminds me of that story in the book about that guy trying to change his airline tickets.
Yeah.
And the airline employee was just adamant that it couldn't be done. The flight had already departed. But instead of getting frustrated, the guy said, I completely understand if you can't do this, but I was hoping you might be able to help me.
So he acknowledged the limitations.
Right.
And he gave the employee a graceful way to say no.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And guess what?
What?
The employee found a way to change the tickets.
He did. He did. I guess by giving him that out, he felt empowered to make a decision.
Right.
Without feeling forced or obligated.
It's so clever.
Yeah. And also, by acknowledging the limitations, you're implicitly complimenting their competence.
Right.
By assuming that if it were possible, they'd be the one to do it.
Oh, that's really smart.
Right.
Yeah, it's almost like reverse psychology.
It is a little bit.
You're giving them the freedom to say no, but in a way, you're increasing the likelihood that they'll say yes.
Exactly.
It's brilliant.
But what about when disagreements are just unavoidable?
Ooh.
How do you navigate those tricky situations without damaging the relationship?
That's a great question, and one we'll have to dive into in part 2 of this deep dive.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, disagreements, they're just a part of life, aren't they?
They are.
It's not really about how to avoid them altogether. It's how to navigate them gracefully.
Right.
So they don't, derail your relationships or your goals.
Right. And even in a disagreement, you can still maintain a sense of respect and even find common ground.
Absolutely. It's not about winning or losing.
Right.
It's about finding a solution that works for everyone involved.
And it's about remembering that you're not enemies. You're just two people with different perspectives
Exactly.
who are trying to reach a shared understanding.
Yeah. And that's easier said than done.
It is.
Especially when you're dealing with someone who's, very assertive.
Oh, yeah.
Or even confrontational.
I remember this one time I had to correct a mistake that my boss made in a report.
Ooh, that's tricky.
It was so awkward.
Yeah, how did you handle that?
Well, he was presenting it to the team, and there was this, glaring error in the data.
Oh, no.
I was like, oh, my gosh.
I can imagine.
So I knew I had to say something.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to embarrass him in front of everyone.
Right, of course.
So I waited till after the meeting.
Okay.
And then I pulled him aside privately.
Good idea.
And instead of saying, hey, you made a mistake in the report, I used this phrase from the book.
Okay.
I said something like, could you clarify something for me? Because I want you to be totally happy with my order.
Oh, that's a good one.
So it kind of shifted the focus.
It does.
Away from you're wrong.
Yeah.
To let's make sure we're on the same page.
Exactly. And make sure the report's accurate.
Right.
Because ultimately that's what matters.
Yeah. And he actually really appreciated it.
Oh, wow.
He admitted that he had rushed through the report.
Okay.
And thanked me for catching the error.
That's great.
So we were able to correct it before it caused any problems.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it totally preserved our relationship.
Yeah, I think what you did there was you turned a potentially confrontational situation into a collaborative one.
Exactly.
And, by framing it as a request for clarification, you gave him a chance to kind of save face and maintain his authority while also ensuring that the report was accurate.
That's exactly it.
So, yeah, even when you have to deliver difficult news or address a sensitive issue, it's so important to focus on the solution.
Yes.
Not the problem.
Solutions, not problems.
Exactly. And that actually segues perfectly into another important tool.
Okay.
The art of the handwritten thank you note.
Oh, I'm a huge advocate for thank you notes.
Really?
I send them for everything.
Like what?
To service people, to wait staff.
Oh, wow.
I even sent one to the police officer who helped me jumpstart my car once.
That's great.
I'm in a world that's dominated by emails and texts.
Yeah.
A handwritten note really stands out.
It does. It shows that you took the time and effort.
Exactly.
To express your appreciation in a personal way.
It's personal and it's meaningful.
It is, and that effort doesn't go unnoticed.
And I've found that it creates this ripple effect of goodwill.
How so?
Because people are more likely to go above and beyond for you.
Oh, interesting.
In the future.
Yeah.
If they feel valued and appreciated.
Makes sense.
It's like you're investing in the relationship.
Yeah, you're nurturing that relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a small gesture, but it speaks volumes.
It really does.
About your character and your commitment to building those strong relationships.
And this doesn't have to be limited to business interactions.
Right.
These principles of persuasion are just as valuable in our personal lives.
Oh, absolutely.
The book tells this really cute story about the author's 8-year-old niece, Samantha.
Okay.
She wanted her friend to come outside and play. But her friend was being stubborn and refused to leave the house.
Oh, kids.
And so instead of getting into an argument, she used this classic persuasion technique.
What did she do?
She made her friend feel included and valued.
Oh, smart.
She said something like, okay, well, I'm going outside anyway, but it won't be as much fun without you.
Aw.
And it worked.
Really?
Her friend immediately changed her mind and ran outside to join her.
Wow. Even at 8 years old.
I know.
She understood those principles.
It's amazing.
Loves persuasion.
It shows you that these principles are not some secret formula.
Right.
They're based on basic human psychology.
Yeah. We all want to feel valued.
We do.
Appreciated and included.
Exactly. And when we can tap into those core desires, we can build stronger relationships and achieve our goals more effectively.
Absolutely.
Whether it's persuading a friend to play outside, or negotiating a major business deal.
The principles are the same.
They really are.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Now, the book also delves into some interesting strategies for dealing with those situations where people just tend to automatically say no.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Like when you're asking for a favor or making a request. One tactic they talk about is called the negative yes.
The negative yes. What's that?
So it's basically phrasing your request in a negative way.
Okay.
So that a no answer actually works in your favor.
Interesting. I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you're trying to get someone to commit to a meeting. Instead of saying, are you available to meet next week?
Yeah.
You could say, would it be impossible for you to meet next week?
Oh, so you're framing it as a negative.
Right.
So that if they say no,
yeah,
it actually means they are available.
Exactly.
That's clever.
It's a little bit manipulative.
It is, yeah.
But it can be effective.
Yeah, in certain situations.
In certain situations.
I like that.
Yeah, the book also has some, like, really unexpected advice.
Like what?
Like, they suggest offering a cab driver a cup of coffee when you leave the hotel.
Oh.
Like, as a thank you.
As a thank you. Okay.
It's just a small gesture of kindness that can go a long way.
Why a cab driver specifically?
Well, cab drivers deal with a lot of rude and demanding passengers.
Right.
So a simple act of kindness can really make their day.
Okay.
And it might make them more inclined to go the extra mile for you.
I see. So it's about creating that positive association, not bribing them or anything.
Right. You're just showing appreciation.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness.
Absolutely.
The book also encourages us to compliment the uncomplimented.
The uncomplimented.
Yeah, the people who often go unnoticed?
Like who?
Like the waitstaff at our favorite restaurant.
Okay.
Or the sky caps at the airport, the cleaning staff at our office.
Right. People who we don't always think to thank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just a simple thank you or a sincere compliment can really brighten their day.
I bet.
And make them feel seen and appreciated.
It all goes back to that idea of making people feel good about themselves.
Exactly. And recognizing the value that everyone brings to the table, no matter how big or small their contribution might seem.
And sometimes the most persuasive thing we can do is actually just admit when we're wrong.
That's a tough one.
It is.
The book quotes Dexter Yeager, who says, I can apologize when I'm wrong.
And I can apologize when I'm not wrong.
Wow.
Can you?
That's a powerful statement.
It is. It's about humility and accountability.
It's easy to apologize when we're clearly in the wrong.
Right.
But it takes a certain level of maturity.
Yeah.
To apologize even when we think we're right.
It's about putting the relationship above being right.
Exactly.
And sometimes an apology can be the most persuasive tool of all.
It can diffuse a tense situation, rebuild trust.
Absolutely.
And pave the way for a more productive conversation.
It's acknowledging that we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
That being wrong doesn't diminish our value or our worth.
And it brings us back to that idea of focusing on solutions, not problems.
Oh, exactly.
Right, when we're fixated on blaming or proving our point, we miss opportunities to find common ground.
Yeah.
And create those win-win outcomes.
Right. There's a great story in the book about using this approach to actually help a friend who's facing a legal issue.
This is a great story.
I'm going to tell it.
Yeah. So my friend was being sued.
Okay.
And the situation was just incredibly stressful for him.
I bet.
He was ready to fight it out in court.
Oh, wow.
But I knew there had to be a better way.
Yeah.
So I reached out to the opposing party.
Okay.
And proposed a compromise.
What did you propose?
I offered them a partial payment.
Okay.
In exchange for dropping the case entirely.
Wow, that was a bold move.
It was.
What made you think they'd go for it?
Honestly, I wasn't sure if they would.
Yeah.
But I knew it was worth a try.
Yeah.
And I framed it as a win-win.
Okay.
They would get some compensation. And my friend would avoid the stress and expense of a trial.
And they agreed.
They did.
Wow.
It wasn't easy.
I bet.
There was some back and forth. But in the end, we were able to reach an agreement.
That's great.
That worked for everyone.
Well thought.
And it saved my friend a lot of money and heartache.
That's awesome.
And it preserved the relationship between the two parties.
See, that's a perfect example of how creative thinking and a willingness to compromise can lead to these mutually beneficial outcomes.
Right. It's about shifting the focus from me versus you to how can we solve this together?
Exactly. And that's such a valuable skill.
It is.
In any area of life.
Yeah.
Whether it's personal relationships, professional negotiations.
It all comes down to the same principle.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive so far.
We have.
From the power of gratitude to the art of handling disagreements gracefully.
Yep.
And there's one more crucial point that I want to highlight.
Okay, what's that?
The importance of making people feel needed.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's about recognizing those unique talents and abilities that each person possesses.
Right.
And giving them opportunities to shine.
Yeah, I love that.
And the book tells this great story about how you once praised someone's ability to find information.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It was a simple compliment, but it had such a profound impact.
It did.
You told this person that they were like a human search engine.
Yeah.
You said they could find anything.
And they were thrilled.
They were so excited.
They had never had anyone acknowledge that skill before.
And from that point on, they went above and beyond
to
help you find information.
Wow. They even started taking on more challenging research tasks.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to prove their worth.
Exactly.
It's amazing how a simple compliment can unlock someone's potential.
It really is.
And motivate them to excel.
And it speaks to the power of positive reinforcement.
Absolutely.
When we acknowledge people's strengths, we encourage them to develop those strengths even further.
Totally. And that just leads to a more
and productive environment for everyone.
For everyone. But the book also cautions against a common phrase that can actually sabotage our efforts.
Does that?
And that is, don't worry, it'll be easy.
Oh, yeah. I can see how that could backfire.
Yeah, because even if we think something is easy, it's important to acknowledge the effort involved.
Right. It shows respect for the other person's time and skills.
Exactly.
And it sets realistic expectations.
Right.
Because even if it seems easy to you, it might not be easy for them.
Right. And they might feel like you're not taking their effort seriously.
Yeah.
If you just brush it off as being easy.
Yeah. They give a funny anecdote in the book, actually.
Oh, yeah.
About a speaker who was offended when he was asked to have an opener for his presentation.
Yeah. Why was he offended by that?
I know, right? It's standard practice for big events to have opening acts.
Totally.
But he felt like it was beneath him.
Oh.
You know, he was a big name speaker. And he didn't want to share the stage with someone less known.
Oh, I see.
So the promoter actually turned it around by praising the speaker's fame and suggesting that the opener needed the boost of being associated with such a big name.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, so they soothed the speaker's ego and made him feel good about the situation.
Right, and it highlights that importance of understanding people's motivations.
Yeah.
And finding ways to frame things in a positive light.
And sometimes a little flattery can go a long way.
It can.
As long as it's sincere.
Right, it can't be fake.
It can't be.
People can spot that.
We can.
From a mile away.
Yeah, for sure.
The book also emphasizes the importance of being consistent in our actions.
Oh, yeah. Consistency is key.
If we're flaky or unpredictable, it undermines our credibility.
Yeah, people can't trust us.
Right, people can't trust us.
If we're not consistent.
And that consistency extends to our values and principles as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
if we say one thing but do another,
yeah,
it creates this cognitive dissonance.
It does.
And makes people question our authenticity.
Right. And people are drawn to those who are genuine and true to themselves.
So being consistent in our actions and our words is crucial for building trust.
Absolutely.
And credibility.
Now, another powerful persuasion technique is to actually bring up the other person's side of the issue before presenting your own.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like acknowledging their perspective, validating their concerns, and it shows that you're listening and that you respect their point of view.
And it kind of disarms them a little bit.
It does.
Because when they feel heard,
they're
more likely to be open to what you have to say.
Exactly. They're not feeling defensive right away.
And the book is this great example of how Abraham Lincoln used this tactic in his legal career.
Oh, wow.
He would often start his arguments by highlighting the strengths of the opposing side's case.
Oh, wow. So he wasn't afraid to acknowledge the validity?
He wasn't afraid to say, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
They have some good points.
Yeah.
And by doing that, he actually established his own credibility and fairness.
I see.
And it made the judge and jury more receptive to his own arguments.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that persuasion isn't about winning at all costs.
Right.
It's about finding that common ground.
Right.
Creating those mutually beneficial outcomes.
It brings us to one of the most powerful persuasion tools of all.
Okay, what's that?
The Art of Storytelling.
Oh, yeah. Stories are powerful.
They're incredibly powerful.
Why do you think that is?
Well, stories connect with people on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And they make our message more memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a story in the book about how you used a personal anecdote
Oh, yeah.
to connect with a potential client who was initially hesitant.
Yes. This guy was really skeptical of my services.
Okay.
And wasn't sure if he wanted to work with me.
So what did you do?
So I shared a story about my own struggles with financial planning and how I eventually overcame those challenges.
Yeah, but you made yourself vulnerable.
I did.
Yeah.
And it really helped him connect with me on a deeper level.
I bet, because he saw that you were a real person who understood his concerns and genuinely wanted to help.
Exactly.
And that's what stories do.
Yeah.
They make us relatable.
They build rapport.
Yeah, they establish credibility.
And they can be incredibly persuasive, especially when they're authentic.
Absolutely.
And heartfelt.
But sometimes the most persuasive thing we can do is actually say nothing at all.
Oh, the power of silence.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried that?
I have, and it's so much harder than it sounds.
It is.
Because we feel this need to fill every silence with words.
We do. We get uncomfortable with silence.
But silence can be so powerful.
It can.
It gives the other person space to think.
Yeah.
To process what we've said and to formulate their own response.
And it shows that we're confident in our message.
Right.
Like we don't need to talk over them.
Right. We don't need to interrupt.
Now keep talking.
The book tells this great story about how you used silence to your advantage in a negotiation.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
You were negotiating a contract, and the other party was pushing back on one of your terms.
I just decided to pause and let them speak.
And what happened?
They ended up talking themselves into agreeing to my term.
Oh.
They just needed that space to think.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like the best way to persuade sometimes is to create the conditions for the other person to persuade themselves.
Exactly.
It's brilliant.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
I mean, from the importance of respect and gratitude to the power of storytelling and silence.
Right.
Persuasion is clearly a multifaceted skill.
It is.
That requires both knowledge and practice.
And while we've explored a wide range of tactics and techniques, I think the most important takeaway
is this. The art of persuasion is ultimately about human connection.
Yeah, it's about understanding people's motivations, building rapport, and creating those win-win outcomes.
And if we approach every interaction with empathy and a genuine desire to help others, we'll be well on our way to becoming master persuaders.
Absolutely. And remember, persuasion is not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
The best persuaders are adaptable.
Yeah.
You know, they can adjust their style based on the situation and the person they're interacting with.
It's about being observant, being empathetic, and being willing to experiment with different strategies to see what works best.
And above all, be genuine.
Yes.
People can spot insincerity
Oh, yeah.
a mile away.
Mile away.
So if you're trying to persuade someone to do something that they don't believe in or that goes against their values, it's going to backfire.
It's not going to work.
Authenticity is key.
It is.
When people believe that we're being truthful and that we have their best interests at heart, they're much more likely to be receptive to our message.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive into the art of persuasion, what's the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that persuasion is a skill.
Okay.
It can be learned and developed. It's not some magical talent that some people are born with and others aren't.
It's about being intentional.
Yeah.
Being mindful of the messages we're sending and being willing to put in the effort to build those stronger and more meaningful relationships.
And it's a journey.
It is.
Not a destination.
Yeah. There's always more to learn.
Yeah.
More to practice and more ways to refine our approach.
I like that.
But we have one last section to cover.
Okay.
So let's move on to part 3 of our deep dive. Wow, we've covered some really fascinating strategies from the art of persuasion.
We have, it's amazing how many little things can make such a big difference in how we connect with people.
Yeah, and it really drives home the point that persuasion isn't about some grand manipulative scheme or anything.
Right. It's more about understanding the nuances of human interaction and using those insights to build stronger relationships.
And more productive relationships, too.
Exactly.
And one of the things that really stood out to me
was
this idea that sometimes the most persuasive thing we can do is actually not talk at all.
The power of silence.
Yeah.
The power of silence.
It's more effective than we realize.
It really is.
The book tells this great story about how you use silence to your advantage.
Oh, yeah.
In a really high-stakes negotiation.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense situation.
The other party was really digging in their heels.
Yeah, refusing to budge.
Yeah, on this one key point.
So what did you do?
Well, we'd been going back and forth for hours, and it felt like we were at an impasse.
So instead of, pushing back or getting defensive.
You tried something different.
I did. I just stopped talking.
Just stopped talking?
Yeah.
Wow. I bet that was tough.
I just sat there calmly and quietly and waited for them to respond.
I bet that felt like an eternity.
It did. It really did. At first, they seemed confused.
Yeah.
They kept looking at me, waiting for me to say something.
I bet.
But I held my ground.
Good for you.
I knew that if I broke the silence, I would lose all my leverage.
Yeah, you were calling their bluff.
Kind of, yeah. I was forcing them to really think about their position.
Yeah.
And come up with a new approach.
And it worked.
It did.
After a few minutes of awkward silence, they finally started talking again.
They did, and their tone was completely different.
Oh, wow.
Much more conciliatory.
Okay.
Or willing to compromise.
That's amazing.
Yeah, silence can be a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
Especially when it's used strategically.
So how do you use it strategically?
Well, it can create a sense of anticipation. It can force the other person to reevaluate their position.
Right.
And it can even convey a sense of confidence and authority.
So it's like you're saying, I'm so sure of my position that I don't even need to argue about it?
Exactly.
That's a powerful message.
But of course, silence is just one tool in the persuader's toolbox.
We've talked about so many others.
We have, from the importance of gratitude and respect to storytelling, understanding different communication styles.
It's really about using all these different techniques together.
Absolutely.
To create a more authentic and effective way of connecting with people.
And persuasion is not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
The best persuaders are adaptable. They adjust their style and their approach depending on who they're talking to and what the situation is.
So it's about being observant, being empathetic, and being willing to experiment with different strategies.
And above all, being genuine.
Yes.
People can spot insincerity
they can.
From a mile away.
Absolutely. If we're trying to persuade someone to do something that they don't believe in or that goes against their values, it's just not going to work.
It's going to backfire.
It will.
Yeah, authenticity is really key.
When people believe that we're being truthful and that we have their best interests at heart, they're much more likely to be open to our message.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the art of persuasion, what's the one key takeaway that you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that persuasion is a skill.
Okay.
It can be learned and developed.
Right.
It's not some, magical talent that some people are born with and others aren't.
It's about being intentional.
Yeah.
It's about being mindful of the messages we're sending.
Yeah.
And being willing to put in the effort to build those stronger, more meaningful relationships.
And it's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely.
There's always more to learn, more to practice, and more ways to refine our approach.
Well said.
Yeah.
So to our listener out there, we encourage you to take what you've learned from this deep dive and start putting it into practice in your own life. Pay attention to the small things. Experiment with different techniques.
Yeah.
And be amazed at the positive impact you can have on the people around you.
Because the art of persuasion really isn't about manipulating people or getting them to do what you want.
Right.
It's about connecting with them on a deeper level, building trust and understanding, and creating those win-win outcomes that benefit everyone involved.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of persuasion.
Yeah, it's been fun.
We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy persuading.